Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, let's pray as we start into our study for this evening. Father, this evening we just thank you that we can again look into your word, and we know that it's there for our instruction. We just pray as we look into 2 Samuel 14 and 15 that you would instruct us, that you would encourage us, that you'd build us in our faith, and that you would just guide in our discussion. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, last week we finished up at chapter 14, verse 20, and so we're going to pick it up from there. And just to set the stage, just one second. You have some? Okay. All right. If you recall, Absalom has been in exile, so to speak, with his grandparents after his killing of Amnon. And so Joab had wanted David to bring Absalom back home. And so he conspires to have this woman come and put on a story that would influence David to force him to recall Absalom to the palace. At any rate, we want to pick it up from there. And so at the end of verse 20, David recognizes that what the woman is saying in her analogy that she gave, that she was actually referring to the conflict within his own family. And he recognized too, and he says it, that Joab was behind the woman coming to him. So picking it up at verse 21 to 24, it says, "Then the king said to Joab, 'Behold, now I will surely do this thing,'" that is, bringing Absalom home. "Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom." Joab fell on his face to the ground, prostrated himself, and blessed the king. Then Joab said, "Today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, O my lord the king, in that the king has performed the request of his servant." So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. However, the king said, "Let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face." So Absalom turned to his own house and did not see the king's face. So what effect does Joab's action have on David?
He was convicted to bring his own son
Yes.
back.
Yeah, he was convicted and
still did not fully reconcile with him.
No, it's not a full reconciliation, is it, by any means? Okay. Because he had him go where?
To his own house.
To his own house. So that's the restriction placed on Absalom, that he has to stay in his own home, and he can't come to the palace to see his father. The only way you can get into the presence of the king is if he invites you to come. Okay, so by David sending him home, Absalom had no choice. He couldn't go to the king. Pardon me?
House arrest.
Yes, basically that's what it was. He was under house arrest. So I'm wondering, why would David do this? Any thoughts?
I mean, not really, doesn't really seem a lot like punishment, but is that David trying to bring some serious thought to Absalom on his actions?
Yeah, possibly. I have no real definitive answer to that. It just seems a little strange to bring him back to Jerusalem, but not into his father's presence. Why does David keep him at a distance?
Maybe he still didn't want to appear weak to the people around and maybe gauge their reaction and let them kind of accept him being there before he sees them.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. The thing is, I think it's probably public knowledge by now what has occurred and why Absalom went to his grandparents and why he hasn't been around Jerusalem, and that he's responsible for murder, really, and has been spared. And so David may be thinking, as Suzanne said, about what's the impression, what's the perception in the public, okay? We're not just going to excuse this, okay? All right. Looking back at verse 22 again, I wrote down here, what's obvious from Joab's words? He says, Joab fell on his face on the ground, prostrated himself, and blessed the king. Then Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, O my lord the king, in that the king has performed the request of his servant. He says, today I have found favor in your sight. What does that seem to suggest?
Maybe not always David would give him opportunity to comply with his suggestions.
Okay. I think what I was kind of looking for here was, I think Joab has mentioned this before. I don't think this is anything really new. I think, because he conspired to bring this woman in to coerce David to action, seems to suggest, when he says, today your servant, like, yesterday I didn't find favor, but today I do. So it seems to suggest that Joab has been trying to work with David to bring Absalom back. And so he had to go, that was my thinking, why bring this woman to do this in the first place? Why not just talk to the king? I think he had, okay? And so it didn't go anywhere, so he puts about his own plot, okay? Conspires, okay? Verses 24 and 28, let's look at that again. It says, however, the king said, let him turn to his own house and let him not see my face. So Absalom turned to his own house and did not see the king's face. Then dropping down to verse 28. Now Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem and did not see the king's face. Okay. What are your thoughts on Absalom returning to Jerusalem but not going to his father?
I think he was growing bitter.
Yes, he's growing, yeah.
I think when he was informed about coming back, for sure he was hoping to some kind of relationship rebuild.
Yes. Yeah, he was probably hopeful of being restored to his father. And so, as Eva said, it would build bitterness, okay, in his heart. And I think, too, in some respects, with David not allowing Absalom to come back, he's trying to figure out, how do I deal with this guy? How do I deal with my son? He's not, as we've already discussed previously, he's not the disciplinarian that he needs to be. And so he can't excuse him, but he can't approve either by bringing him into his presence, so he's kind of stuck in the middle somewhere.
I think David, too, was probably feeling guilty that he committed the same crime. He committed murder as well.
Yes.
So he wants to do right by his son, but on the other hand, if he let him go altogether free, then everybody's going to say, what gives you the right? You did the same. How?
Yeah. So he really can't do anything to anyone. Okay, if he accepts him back fully. Okay, like what if somebody else in society commits a murder? Okay, so can they execute him? or can David be involved, or how does he, it's very complicated, okay? It's especially when you're in a position of high authority, and the people are all looking at you and watching and judging you, what you do. So I think in some respects he's caught between a rock and a hard place.
As good, he was fighting and being really great warrior.
Yes.
I think, on the other hand, was really not great parental skills.
No.
Presenting not great parental.
No, his family life is a mess. Okay. Verses 25 and 26 here. It says, "Now in all Israel was no one as handsome as Absalom, so highly praised. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head there was no defect in him. When he cut the hair of his head, and it was at the end of every year that he cut it, for it was heavy on him, so he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels by the king's weight." So I wrote here, why was Absalom popular with the people?
Because he was handsome.
He was handsome. Okay, all right. Any other reasons why they would really like him?
I think he had really good social skills, because we remember when he wanted to be very popular and be elected as a king,
Yeah.
he would stay in the city and welcome people and try to help them.
Yes, that's coming up here in just a second. Yes, Eva, you've read this section before, I know. Yes. As Eva said here, he had a very engaging personality, okay? And he also had status and wealth, okay? So he was in the public eye, okay? He had his own home, he had his own fields, and the fact that he was so good looking, that's no different than our culture today, is it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who are the most popular people?
Yeah.
The Hollywood crowd, right? It's based on looks, appearance, personality. It's all on the outside, okay?
Know how to use it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely trained in that, how to use that. Yes. And if you met them on a more personal level, you might not find they're as charming as they are in public. Okay, what they are behind closed doors is something else. But, well, I mean, we don't have to go very far to know what the truth is for a lot of those people. I mean, many divorces and children problems and alcohol and abuse and whatever, famous or not, at any rate. Going on here, picking it up, let's read 20, let's pick it up at, let's take it back to 28, okay? Get in the right place here, that would help. Now Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem and did not see the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. So he sent again, a second time, but he would not come. Therefore he said to his servants, "See, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire." So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab arose, came to Absalom at his house, and said to him, "Why have your servants set my field on fire?" Absalom answered Joab, "Because I sent for you, saying, 'Come here, that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me still to be there. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there is iniquity in me, let him put me to death.'" That's an interesting statement. So when Joab came to the king and told him, he called for Absalom. Thus he came to the king and prostrated himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. So what's the desperate action that Absalom takes?
Asking to have a visit with his father.
Yeah, he did that first. I mean, that was a good thing to do. Vandalism, yes.
Not
Okay.
very repentant either.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Does he apologize to Joab?
He's proud of what he did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, hey,
I called you, you didn't come.
you didn't come. Yeah. I mean, who do you think you are? Commander of the army?
Just curious, when it says then the king kissed Absalom, isn't it supposed to be the other way? Isn't Absalom supposed to like kiss the king's hand or something like that?
Well, he bowed before him. He bowed before the king. I don't think you ever touch the king unless, if you're ever familiar with British royalty,
Yes.
okay, you were never allowed to shake hands with the queen or touch her in any way unless she made the move. Okay,
You
I
would
think.
see the queen kiss somebody though, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of how the court works. I don't.
Maybe it's normal, I just thought it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
Just kind of my fault.
Yeah, it almost seems as though, I mean, David would be sitting up here on the throne, and Absalom is on his face down here. It seems to me like David has come down from the throne and embraced his son, okay? Which signifies acceptance, right?
I see it as, I see it like you just said, like weakness kind of thing, like coming down to him
Yes,
rather than him coming.
yeah, yeah. Do you know what the law required of an arsonist? I use this as Exodus 22:6.
They're supposed to make restitution.
Yes, we don't need to read that verse, but yeah, he has to repay the property that he has destroyed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's required, but there's no mention of that. Okay, I mean, whether it took place, it might have, but it's not there in the scriptures. Okay, so the ultimatum that Absalom presented to Joab was,
When I call, you come.
well, okay, yes. What did he want him to do if he had come?
To speak to the king
Speak to the king and?
and make it possible for him to see his father.
Yes. Okay, so that was the ultimatum, okay? All right. I wrote down here, I said, what ultimatum does Absalom present to Joab? Take him to the king and let him receive him and forgive him. It could be, or take him to court and prove he was guilty of a capital crime and deserving to die. Of course, we already know that he should be put to death according to the law. Okay, all right. So in Absalom's mind, is he thinking that he's going to be put to death? Why not?
Special sound.
He knows his father. He's already figured out that his father doesn't have the guts, so to speak, to do what he should do. So he knows his father well. He's very, I hate to call him wise, shrewd, that's the word we have for him. And he can read people really well, okay? And I think he knows that if he gets in front of the king, that he's not going to lose his life. You know, otherwise he probably would have just stayed in his house,
Kept quiet.
okay? He would have been better off there, right? Okay, so what does Joab feel coerced to do? To request that David receive Absalom, okay? Okay, what does Absalom being allowed to enter the court signify?
Forgiveness and acceptance kind of thing.
Yes.
But it was forced on his terms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't on David's or Joab's terms, okay? Yeah, so it would seem that it would signify that he's forgiven and that he's allowed to be back in the court. Okay? This is an open door for him. Okay? I think he's already thinking. He's already conspiring. Okay? Things are going on there. So what is there no record of on Absalom's part?
No repentance.
There's no repentance. He falls on his face or puts himself on his face before the king because that's the cultural thing to do. But it doesn't show anything, he doesn't say anything about him asking for forgiveness. No repentance. And he doesn't go to the temple to make any sacrifices for his sin either. I mean, there's no mention of it. So you would think, okay, no, he didn't. Okay? So what's Absalom free to do now?
Whatever he pleases.
Pretty much. Okay. Yeah, he could. Do you think he likes public attention?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, these verses here, in verse 23 about his good looks and stuff, seems to say that he flaunted that. Okay. And so now he's free to roam the city and receive all the adulation that he desires.
Seems like it was a test, like a power struggle with his father, and he forced his hand, either accept me or execute me or something.
Yeah.
And then the father says, okay, come, kind of thing, and,
Yeah.
and he wants to forgive him and everything.
Yeah.
But it seems like in Absalom's mind that he would think that the father then is weak, therefore, and that he's above the law with his father and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So he has more power almost than his father in his mind.
Yep. I think you got it right. This really was a power struggle. And I wouldn't put it past Absalom to think, okay, now I can go to the next step. Now I can, because that's what's coming, okay? He can continue now to plot to seize the throne, okay? Because he would think of his father as being weak, okay? Okay. I skipped over this verse, but let's go back just for a second to verse 27. It says, to Absalom there were born 3 sons, and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. Okay. But if you go over to chapter 18, verse 18, okay, it says, now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself a pillar which is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to preserve my name. So it would seem that though he had sons born to him, they would have all died by this time. Okay? Because there's no additional mention of them ever. Okay? Okay. So that closes 14. Let's go on to chapter 15. Okay. I did put a map on page 56, okay, about, that kind of shows the different movements of Absalom and David and his and the court, and where they actually went during the revolt here that's coming. Okay, so you can refer to that as you need to. So I started off here. This is Absalom's 11-year conspiracy timeline. Okay. First, Amnon rapes Tamar. Absalom conspires for 2 years to kill Amnon. Now, we read that last week. Absalom flees to Geshur, where he remains in exile for 3 years. David has Absalom brought back to Jerusalem, but he is not allowed to return to the palace or to see his father for 2 years. Absalom conspires for the next 4 years. Interesting. To depose his father from the throne and be king of Israel. If you look at verse 7 of chapter 15, it says, now it came about at the end of 4. It says in my translation here, it says 40 years, but it really should be 4. Okay? That I'm not sure. One commentator seemed to suggest that maybe Absalom was about 40 years of age at this time. That's why it says that. But, okay, that Absalom said to the king, please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. Okay, so we got at least 4 years there. So let's read verses 1 to 6. Now it came about after this, that's this restoration, that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men as runners before him. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate, and when any man had a suit to come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, from what city are you? And he would say, your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, see, your claims are good and right, but no man listens to you on the part of the king. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land, that every man who has any suit or cause could come to me, and I would give him justice. And when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kissed him. In this manner Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel. Okay. So what are the first steps that Absalom makes toward overthrowing his father? Let's take it in progression here.
Provide himself chariot.
Yes. Yeah. So he's got a chariot and horses. And what do you do with a chariot and horses?
He was preparing for battle, I think.
Oh, yes, not
Maybe
initially.
Not yet, but he was just gathering the equipment.
Yeah, who has a chariot and horses?
King.
The king. Okay, or prominent people at least. Okay.
Pharaoh. Pharaoh
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. So, and what did he do with the chariot and the horses?
He had the runners before him.
Oh yeah. So what he
Make
was all
himself
over
look-
town.
Make himself look important.
Ah, yes. That's it. That's it. He's out there riding around in his chariot, and everybody's going, "Hey, look at it! Wow!"
And check the hair and the wind.
Yeah, and the hairs in the wind. Yes. It fits the profile. Okay. All right. So he becomes very visible, doesn't he? He makes sure that everybody knows who he is. Oh, here comes Absalom. Okay. He's touring around the city. And what's the next thing he starts doing?
Butter up the people.
How do you do that?
Play on their emotions.
Yeah, he did.
Just pay attention to people's affairs.
Yeah. Judgment, the judges usually were in the gate of the city, okay? And so he would be there and he would greet people who came with whatever grievance they had, okay? You don't get to go to the king unless it's something pretty major. So when some of these people were coming, the king didn't meet with everybody who came, with a request or whatever, So he's got other things to do besides meeting with 3,000 people who show up to talk to him, Pardon me?
Trivial stuff.
Yes, he's not going to deal with that. So these were probably more major issues that Absalom inserts himself into. And so he meets people at the gate. We've already said he ingratiates himself with the people. He's flattering them, okay? And then in those verses we read, what is he putting in people's minds as it concerns the king?
The king is not interested in their issues.
Yes, the king's not really interested in you.
But I am.
Yes. Okay. And he actually says it here. He says, no one's listening to you. No one's going to listen to you. But if I was a judge, okay, things would be different around here.
Sounds like power again. He's lowering their image of the king and raising his own image
Yes, exactly.
Opposite party.
Pardon me?
Opposite party.
Yeah, yeah, the opposite party, yeah, yeah, like we have in our politics, yes. I mean, maybe you're as disgusted as I am when we have this slamming the other party all the time. No, just tell us the stuff that you want to do. Ignore the rest. Anyways,
Lots of lying, like here too.
lying, a lot of lying. Yes, yes,
Just to put yourself in the super nice light.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You never hear them say, I hope to be able to do such and such. It's, I will do such and such. Yeah,
But
right.
the other one doesn't.
Well, we could get into a whole other discussion here, but at any rate, this whole thing of having a chariot and horses is something that Samuel had predicted as a behavior of Israel's kings. Okay, in 1 Samuel 8:11, it talks about the king. He says to the people, when this is when they were asking for a king, he says, I just want you to know, when you have a king, he's going to acquire chariots and horses, and he's going to make your young men run ahead of him. Okay?
Guess who's gonna pay for it?
And you are going to pay for it. Yes. Okay?
And pay the very high taxes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there'll be taxes. There'll always be tax. I mean, can you have a king and a palace without? Okay. And Moses also had warned against the acquisition of horses. Deuteronomy 17:16. Let's just look at that for a second. Deuteronomy 17. Verse 16. Okay. Let's see here. Where am I? Moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself. This is the warning to the king. Moreover, he shall not multiply for him horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. Then he goes on and he talks about multiplying wives as well. Okay, so why would Moses warn about the acquisition of horses?
Trust
Okay, you want to expand on that a little bit?
that the people would put their trust in their agility of horses to defeat their enemies
Okay,
rather than in the Lord.
well that brings to mind, but I don't know what's. Do you remember the verse that talks about not to put our trust in horses?
Yes.
Hmm?
Yeah, I remember it's in Proverbs.
It's in Proverbs. Okay.
I don't know which one, but I know it's in Proverbs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they would think because they had horses and chariots, you see, you'd have a mighty army, perhaps, right? And he says, and he reminds them about Egypt. Now, Egypt came after Israel when they left, okay, with chariots and horses. And what happened to them?
They got drowned.
They drowned in the Red Sea. Okay? So don't put your trust in chariots and horses. Yes?
Psalm 33:17.
Psalm 33:17?
A horse is a false hope.
Ah, very good. Okay. Absalom was free to work his deceit because of the laxness of David toward his sons in matters of discipline. Do you think David didn't know what Absalom was doing around town?
He must have.
Pardon me?
He must have known.
Oh, he'd have to know. He'd have to know what's going on there. I mean, people coming into the court are going to say, guess where I saw Absalom today? You know, okay? If you go over to 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 6, which proves this point. 1 Kings 1, verse 6. His father had never crossed him at any time by asking, "Why have you done so?" And he was also a very handsome man, and he was born after Absalom. Okay, so he's just talking here. The point here is this: he's talking about Adonijah, actually, but that he never crossed his son. He never corrected him. Okay, and he hadn't with Absalom either, really. Okay, okay. So why don't the people see through Absalom's tactics?
I think that he's becoming more and more popular.
Okay, he's becoming popular, yeah, because of what he's doing in the gate, for one thing.
Yeah, they thought probably that he was genuine, that he really cared about their circumstances.
Yeah, he was flattering, yeah, and so they would believe him. So they were. It's no different than in our culture today. What are people looking for?
Understanding of their problems.
A what?
Understanding of people's problems.
Okay,
Not
yeah.
the leaders.
Yeah, so the general public today, where are their eyes drawn when it talks about other people? Everybody's looking for a hero, okay? We've had this surge in the last few years, well, it's not just a few, of the superheroes, right? All the movies that have come out with, first was Superman and Batman years ago when I was a child, and now we've got all these others who have come on after, and everybody loves this. They're just drawn to this, okay? I mean, I can't say that I don't enjoy the action and everything that goes on, but I recognize there's a flaw in this because they can still fall, okay? And yes?
I think also the people may have been just getting tired of David, because David's been around for so long.
Yes. Yeah, he's been on the throne. We said he was over 60, so he's probably about 64, 65 years of age now. We said last week he was about 60 when Absalom went into exile, so now he's about 60. And then Absalom's doing this for 4 years. So David's getting up in his mid to late 60s, okay? And he's been king since he was 40? I want to say 40.
And he's been known since he was a boy.
Yes, right.
And
So,
they have thought the king supported his son doing this, because they must have known, obviously, he was aware of it, and he continued to let it happen, and
yeah,
he supported it.
yeah, exactly. All right. We've already talked about the fact that people are drawn to Absalom's good looks, okay, and his flamboyant lifestyle, okay. That's what society is looking at today, not just the superheroes, but who gets all the accolades, okay? It's the rich and the famous, okay? The Hollywood people, the ones who are in the spotlight, okay? And everybody reveres them, lifts them up. Oh, he's such a wonderful guy. She's such a wonderful, Really?
I don't know what.
Maybe not. Okay. And Absalom told the people what they wanted to hear and said that he would give it to them. Right? So all of those things have gradually turned the hearts of the people towards Absalom as perhaps their, if you want to put it this, their savior. Okay? All right. So looking at verses 7 to 12, it says, "Now it came about at the end of the 4 years, that Absalom said to the king, 'Please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I was living at Geshur in Aram, saying, If the Lord shall indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord.' The king said to him, 'Go in peace.' And so he arose and went to Hebron. But, the but, you almost want to underline that word, okay? Okay, and now I lost my place. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. Then 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, who were invited and went innocently, and they did not know anything. Okay? And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city Gilah, while he was offering the sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. So what's the next step in Absalom's conspiracy? Step by step here. Let's just walk.
Slowly take over.
Oh, well, okay. What's his first step here?
Ask the king to go.
Yeah,
It takes 200 men with them.
yeah. So is he actually going to make a vow? Is he actually going to fulfill a vow? No. So the first thing he does with the king is he lies, right? He never made any vow, because it's quite obvious as you read through the verses that there's no vow, or that he's not doing anything. Okay, and then because he's fulfilling this vow, and he went to the king, and the king said, go, everybody would say, well, he had the king's permission to go to Hebron. He didn't go on his own, okay? The king allowed him to go, okay? And so the next step is then he continues to build support. He takes 200 people with him when he leaves Jerusalem. That's a significant crowd, okay? And you notice what it said about these 200 people?
What was the question, sorry?
What does it say about these 200 people and their knowledge of the situation?
They didn't know. what
They
was
didn't
going on.
know. Yes.
They had not been aware what is the plan.
Innocently went.
Yeah, they were innocent. I mean, they were obviously followers, but they didn't realize this was the beginning of a revolt, okay? They've been caught, in a sense. And, okay, I wrote down here, this also gives credence to his invitation, that there were people from David's administration, 200 people from the court probably, for the most part, who went along, which tends to suggest that this is all above board. It's not just Absalom, it's all these people, okay, lending their support. Then he seeks the support of Ahithophel. Who's Ahithophel? Based on what it said here. There's more information we're going to deal with in just a second. But
One of David's trusted cohorts. I guess.
yeah, counselor. He was a counselor. He's been a counselor for David from way back at the beginning of his reign. Okay, for many years. And why would Absalom solicit Ahithophel?
He wants to bring him on board.
Yeah, he does.
I think is most convincing that this is all legal issue.
Oh, that too? Yes? Any other thoughts? Where does Ahithophel serve?
That's a counselor.
Yeah, in the court, next to the king, right? And so if you want inside information about what's going on, you want the guy who's probably as close to David, other than the commander of the army, Joab, okay, who will be able to give him the information he needs.
First-hand information.
First-hand information, okay? Okay? And see, Absalom has just given the impression that he's a spiritual man, doesn't he? He says it, okay? That he tells his father, that's how he gets to go to Hebron in the first place. He says, I made a vow while I was in Geshur, okay, that if I got to come back to Jerusalem, I would go to Hebron and I would serve the Lord. Okay, so the question here, who is Ahithophel? Other than being the counselor to the king. Maybe we should look at a couple verses. Let's go to 2 Samuel 23, verse 34. Okay, chapter 23, verse 34. Okay, it says here, Eliphalet, the son of Abishai, Eliam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite. Okay, so Ahithophel had a son whose name was Eliam. Okay? All right, that's all we need to know from there. Then go back to chapter 11, verse 3. It says, so David sent and inquired about the woman, we're talking about Bathsheba, and one said, is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So who is Ahithophel?
Grandfather of Bathsheba?
Grandfather of Bathsheba.
So no, he wants to get even with David.
You're getting ahead of me. Okay. You wonder, don't you? We haven't been told that, but the fact that Ahithophel would actually go to Absalom would suggest that maybe he's been simmering for years.
Just waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, he's really kept this under wraps, hasn't he? Okay, he's been the fact that David has had him as counselor for all these years, when he was the grandfather of Bathsheba, and Ahithophel knows exactly what was going on. Okay, is just astounding that he was never found out that he was waiting for revenge, maybe. Okay, so why would Absalom choose Hebron as his base? Why go there? Well, there's one, yeah. Maybe you're not aware. He was born there. Okay, he was born in Hebron when David was waiting like the 7 years before he was brought by the elders of Israel to Jerusalem to be king over the whole nation. Okay, because at that point he was just king over Judah. Okay, so Absalom was actually born at the time. So this is his hometown. Okay, so he would be well known there, wouldn't he? Okay, at least if not as an adult, at least as a child. Okay, maybe I'm saying too much here, but there might be people in Hebron who are not really happy the fact that David moved his throne to Jerusalem. Possibly. Okay, I mean, we're reading into it here, but, when you have politics going, there's always the other side, like, why did he do that? Why would he do that? Well, weren't we good enough? Okay. So, at any rate, so let's go on to verse 13 to 17. Okay, then a messenger came to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us will escape from Absalom. Go in haste, or he will overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. Then the king's servants said to the king, behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses. So the king went out and all his household with him, but the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. They were basically, they acted like servants in a sense, okay? The king went out and all the people with him, and they stopped at the last house. Now all his servants passed on beside him, all the Cherethites and the Pelethites and all the Gittites, 600 men who had come with him from Gath, passed on before the king. Number of things here. Why does David flee rather than stay in Jerusalem and confront Absalom and his army?
He didn't want him to be killed.
To want Absalom to be killed?
Yeah.
Okay. Put yourself in the situation as the king.
Maybe he really does not want to fight with his own son.
Could be, yes.
I
Yeah.
think he was scared of him, and he thought his son would win because the people were kind of with his son now. They had, a lot of them had turned against him. And the father, David is weak by the sounds of it, that he's not going to put up a fight, and he thinks he will overtake him and all the people around him will be killed and
Yeah.
destroy the city and everything else.
But, okay, you've said a number of things there, yeah, that are true.
So David has lost his trust in the Lord now at this point, I guess?
We're going to get to that in a minute, but it's a good question, okay? I thought it was interesting in verse 13, it says, "Then a messenger came to David saying, 'The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom.'" That's a little bit maybe too far reaching to say, it's like the whole nation is behind him. Well, there are those behind him, but I don't know that it was that far, okay? I wrote down a number of thoughts here, and Suzanne alluded to this. He doesn't want to fight his son, for one thing, as Robin said, but he doesn't want a lot of innocent people to die. And if Absalom comes and attacks the city, there are going to be a lot of people who die, and the city itself could be destroyed. Okay, and David, David, his whole thing is, this is the place of worship. This is God's residence with us, and we're not going to destroy this. Okay, so I'm going to step aside. Okay. And I think he's trying to avoid a civil war in the nation as well. Okay, he doesn't want people they're forced to take sides. Okay, in addition to what Robin said here, does he know what's going on really?
I wondered if he hadn't woken up then and realized what his son was really capable of. And, I think David seems to be a better man of character, if you want to call it that, but he seems to have feelings for other people other than himself, whereas he knows his son is a narcissist, really. He only cares about himself and his power and how he can use people and doesn't care if they get killed or whatever.
Yep.
It sounds like.
Yeah, Absalom's just interested in using people for his own gain. And David has that compassion towards the people, the fact that he, right away, says, "Gather up our stuff, we're leaving, we're out of here," and we're not even going to stand up to him, okay? What do you think that, in his mind when he thinks of his own life, he knows that God had said there was, the part of the judgment on him for his sin was that there was going to be turmoil within his family. And so, could he be looking at this as part of the judgment that God has placed on him, that he would lose the throne to Absalom? Possibly. Okay. He remembers God's judgment. I wrote a couple of references down here if you want them. Chapter 15, verses 25 and 26, which talks about the judgment that God placed on him. And then he remembers God's judgment in chapter 12, verse 11. Okay. I think maybe I already read these. Okay, I did. Just a minute, hold on. Okay, let's go on here for the next few verses. We're going to come back to this again. It says, "And the king said to Ittai the Gittite, 'Why will you also go with us? Return and remain with the king.'" He started referring to Absalom. "Okay, for you are a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place. You came only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander with us while I go where I will? Return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you." But Ittai answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king, the king lives, surely wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be." Therefore David said to Ittai, "Go and pass over." So Ittai the Gittite passed over with all the men and all the little ones who were with him. While all the country was weeping with a loud voice, all the people passed over. The king also passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. Okay, so back in the verses right at the end, verse 18, it talked about the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and the Gittites. So who are these people? They're not Israelites.
Foreign mercenary soldiers.
True. That's exactly what they are. Okay. So why are they here?
Maybe he was thinking that they might be not loyal to him as they join here, so he rather send them
Send them
to Absalom.
to Absalom. Okay. The fact that they right away leave with David seems to suggest, though I don't not to be unkind, Eva, seems to suggest just the opposite. They're not just staying back; they're going with David. And David says to this one guy, Ittai, he says, "Hey, you don't have to come with me. Go back." And he says, "No, I'm your servant."
Yes.
Okay.
That's what he said, but sometimes, I was just thinking, sometimes the conviction is somewhere else.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. I wrote a verse down here. Chapter 30, or 1 Samuel 30, actually, verse 14, says, "We made a raid on the Negev of the Cherethites and on that which belongs to Judah and on the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire." Okay. The reference to the Cherethites is that they seem to be a Philistine clan. Okay? Now we have to think back. Okay, here. There was a time when David was fleeing from Saul that he aligned himself with the Philistines, and he went into Philistine territory for protection. Okay? And went through that ruse of pretending to be an ally, okay? But then when he finally came out, the tradition has that some of the Philistines defected with David, okay? That they were, whatever testimony David and his entourage had, obviously they had a positive influence on them, that they defected as well from the Philistines and joined with David. It's even thought that, that these men were actually hired by David to be his personal bodyguard. Okay, and so he had these 600 around him. Now we've read before about David and his 600. Now they weren't all foreigners, okay, but it's possible that some of these men were a part of the 600. Because David's 600, when he was running from Saul, were all defects from Saul and possibly the Philistines, okay? They were disenchanted with Saul's reign, and it says they came to David with their families, okay?
They went with the winner.
Right. Though he wasn't the winner at the time.
But they knew.
They knew.
Yeah.
Yes, they knew that he was going to win, okay? So they are mercenaries, as Suzanne said, okay? But they're loyal to David. And so they would be faithful to David alone, not the nation of Israel. They were committed to David, okay, and his protection, okay? So my thinking on that is they wouldn't defect to Absalom or anybody else because they were committed to David, this man, this king, okay? And it doesn't matter what Absalom did. They were still faithful. They would protect him to the death, okay? All right. I already said that before. Probably some of them were Philistines who had defected, okay? Psalm 4. Now we're just going to take a couple more minutes here and then we'll stop. But instead of me reading these, I'm going to have some of you read these psalms. So let's go to Psalm 4. Somebody volunteer to read Psalm 4. It's not very long. Somebody other than me.
I can do that.
Okay, Mark, please. Thank you.
Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O sons of men, how long will my honor become a reproach? How long will you love what is worthless and aim at deception? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly man for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Tremble and do not sin. Meditate in your heart upon your bed and be still. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and trust in the Lord. Many are saying, who will show us any good? Lift up the light of your countenance upon us, O Lord. You have put gladness in my heart, more than when their grain and new wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me to dwell in safety.
This psalm is believed to have been written by David that first evening after he left Jerusalem. Interesting. When you read those verses, you would raise the question of David's trust in the Lord. This psalm would say yes. So he left the city, which you would think, well, he's not trusting the Lord, okay, because he's defecting, right? But let's flip the coin. Is he actually trusting the Lord?
You wonder if he doesn't blame himself really for this turmoil, starting with, all his actions. I wrote down some thoughts like starting with Bathsheba, not protecting Tamar, the death of Amnon because of not recognizing what was happening, not saying no to Absalom when he was probably a kid, continually letting him cross the line and not punishing him, and it all kind of spirals to this disaster.
Right, and he's not going to make it worse, okay, by causing a civil war or the city of Jerusalem being invaded. Let him have it. And so in a sense, David in Psalm 4 here has surrendered. It's in your hands, Lord. And I think he's saying, he doesn't say it here, but I think in his mind maybe it was like, I deserve this. And you work it out. We've seen that as kind of a pattern in David's life. All those years he was running from Saul, he had two specific opportunities to kill Saul. And he said, no, I will not touch the Lord's anointed. And the Lord will put me in my position of power in his timing. And so I think he's back here again with the same thing. The Lord will work this out however he wants to do it. And I'm not going to push my own agenda. Okay?
Probably, as you mentioned before, he was thinking about judgment.
Yes.
Which he was told that he will not depart from his household.
Yeah. And he wants to protect the people who are in the court. Because if Absalom were to take Jerusalem, who are the first people, if not the people coming into the city, the first people to lose their lives are going to be all the people in the court, and he's going to replace them with his own people. So he wants to protect those who are closest to him. Okay? Psalm 3. Someone read
I can
Psalm?
read that.
Okay.
Lord, how they have increased who troubled me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David is thinking back to all the things he's experienced and how the Lord has delivered him in the past from his enemies. Is this any different? No. And so again, this psalm is thought that was written in that same time period as he flees from Absalom. It seems to fit perfectly, okay, when you look at it that way. I wrote these down, or I have it in my notes here, and maybe you can read them on your own. Psalm 41 and 55 could possibly have been written during David's flight from Jerusalem. They show David pouring out his heart to the Lord, and the Lord heard him and answered his prayer. And in Psalm 61, 62, and 63, we see David asking the Lord for guidance and strength. They end with a strong affirmation of faith in the Lord. Okay? Not that we've ever been in this kind of a situation, but we all have struggles in our lives, and we've had some pretty major things happen to us in our lives. Each of us could have our own stories of things that have happened that have just been either tragic or very unsettling. And it's important, how did we react? You know, and David could be the example for us. Okay, Lord, I don't understand what's happening. I don't know why this is happening, but it's in your hands. I surrender to you. Actually, that's the only place we find any peace. Otherwise, we're always going to be upset, okay? And I'm sure you could share your own testimonies of things and how the Lord met you in those things. And I have my own as well. And that's, every day I still have to come back to that. You know, every day it raises its head, you know, because a lot of those things don't go away just overnight. You know, they're there for a period of time. And where I have to go back and say, Lord, this is yours. Lord, this is yours. And then I'm able to rest in it, knowing that the Lord will work it out to his glory. And I think we have that testimony here of David that just speaks so loud, because it'd be easy for us to judge him in this situation is, hey, you coward, stand up and fight. You know, the throne belongs to you. Why are you going to allow this upstart to come in and take it? Okay, but David's got a much larger understanding and picture of the whole situation. And so sometimes surrender is not defeat. Surrendering to the Lord, and that's what he's doing here. He's saying, Lord, it's yours. This is your situation to work out. Anyways, I think that's on a good place to stop for this evening, okay? And we'll pick it up back in chapter 15 next week. Thank you, folks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.